We are welcoming the British Ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Hatfull, the Honorable First Secretary of Political Section, Mrs. Julia Nolan, the Honorable Chair of the Program of the Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies of University of Indonesia, Professor Dr. Lydia Friani Hawadi, psychologist, the respectable home-based lecturers of the Program of the Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies of University Indonesia, attendances of the lecture series. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all of you. Today, we are very delightful to have an opportunity to hear a lecture series delivered by Your Excellency Mr. Hatfull. On this special occasion, we have chance to enrich our knowledge about England in general and about the Muslim community in England in particular. For your information, the participants of the lecture series are combined of the Civitas Academica of University of Indonesia and the participant of the video conference from seven respectable universities in Indonesia, namely Unsyiah, University of Shah Kuala in Banda Aceh, UNRI, University of Riau in Pekanbaru, UNILA, University of Lampung, UNBRAW, University of Brawijaya in Malang, UGM, University of Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta, UNPAD, University of Pajajaran in Bandung, and the last is UNHAS, University of Hasanuddin in Makassar. As the opening event, let us listen to an opening remarks by Mrs. Friani. To Mrs. Friani, I invite to the podium.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Your Excellency, British Ambassador Martin Hatfull, and to all of you here today. Good morning, our colleagues and students from Unsyiah in Aceh, UNRI in Pekanbaru, UNILA in Lampung, UNPAD in Bandung, UGM in Yogyakarta, UNIBRAW in Malang, and UNHAS in Makassar. Today, we are honored to welcome Ambassador Hatfull of United Kingdom as the first ambassador from the Western world to come to the Middle East and Islamic Studies University of Indonesia. Hopefully, eventually, all our friends from the Western world will come here as well to acknowledge and celebrate the strong and meaningful relationship between Islam and the West, for we share one world deeply influenced by the interaction of these two powerful forces. As two of only a few forces in world history that could rightly be put in the category of global conquerors, both the Muslim and the British shared a few core principles that lead to their successes and propel them into the champions of the world as Earth's mightiest empires. Among those shared principles, I would like to mention three. I call it the 3T. The first T stands for practicing tolerance. Tolerance is the idea that we can live with people not necessarily sharing our own faith and belief, nor create no way of life. When both the Islamic world and the Western world embraces tolerance that open doors for diversity and multiculturalism in society, their civilizations start progressing toward prosperity and glory. When they judge someone based on what they do rather than by their backgrounds, a lot of people could stop living in fear and start being their best selves. Thus, Andalusia was born. In the 10th century, the city of Cordoba, capital of Andalusia, had 70 libraries, the biggest of which had up to 1 million books. In comparison, the largest libraries in Europe at that time had no more than 400 books. The second T is for international trade. Trade is what makes the world goes round, they say, and is possibly one of the most driving factors behind the eagerness of both the Muslims and British to set sail around the world and traveling to the four corners of the earth. It is a well-known fact that the spread of Islam in Indonesia was made by Arab Muslim traders even as early as 8th century. While it might not be as well known a fact, but it's very hard to argue that Singapore, had it not been a British colony used primarily for trading purposes, would ever become the great city-state it is known today. The third T is for innovative technology. Technology is anything man-made or thought that is, if used wisely, could enhance all aspects of human life. The Muslims and British are both prominent inventors. They invent all sorts of things all the time. Not just tangible technology like what Fazlur Rahman Khan did with the turbulent designs, but also, and with equal or even greater importance, is the untangible technology, like what Muhammad Yunus did with his Grameen Bank, a bank that has won him a Nobel Prize, and more importantly, helped millions of people raise their standards of living. As we all perhaps off the top of our head could recall several British inventors. I leave it to you. Just remember that every time you open a page on the internet, you probably owe it to Sir Tim Berners-Lee. My own personal encounter with the United Kingdom started in 1967 when I was just age 10. In my 4th grade, visited London with my father in my first overseas trip to Europe. At that time, Beatles is all there is to it. And for some, like my husband of nearly 30 years, who is a lifelong devoted fan of the Beatles, it still is. He is a devout Muslim, who is a good husband, a good father, and loved by many of his friends and colleagues, and find peace both in Islam and in listening to the Beatles. So, I personally see him as a living proof that the ideas in Islam of the West could synergize in harmony, united in peace. In 2009, he finally made it to the Cavern Club in Liverpool, around 45 years since he first listened to the Beatles album. Dreams do come true, even if it sometimes could take half a century to manifest. I mention the Beatles specifically here because, like Islam and UK, they are a force to be reckoned with. Many people to the world over who don't even know a word of English still love them, still submit to their music, still united to their tunes. The Beatles embodied the 3 T's quite well. They are a symbol of tolerance. They are wealthy and they are inventive musicians. In addition, they also practice what they preach. They are peaceful in their acts, productive in making songs, and progressive in their way of thinking. Everyone loved the Beatles, even my 6 kids and my 3 grandbabies. They move when they hear the songs. So it may not be too much to say that a few things will make millions of Muslims happier and feel closer to the UK than having Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr in a tour in Muslim cities, perhaps even starting in Jakarta as a homage for the capital of the largest Muslim country on the earth. But if you're concerned, Singapore is a viable alternative. The Beatles once sang, "I want to hold your hand." I second that and add, Islam and Britain, let's come together and getting better all the time. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mrs. Franny. For the next event, we invite the moderator, Mr. Munir, to lead this agenda.
Thank you. His Excellency British Ambassador Martin Hartful, the respectable Julian Nolan of Political Section of British Embassy Jakarta, the Honorable Chair of Program of the Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies of the University of Indonesia, Professor Dr. Lydia Freya Nihawadi, Psychologist. Respectable my friends, among whom best lecturer, the beloved attendants in this room and in the distinguished audience, through this video conference of the University of Shah Kuala in Aceh, the University of Riau, the University of Lampung, the University of Brawijaya in Malang, East Java, University of Gadjah Mada, Yogyakarta, University of Pajajaran, Bandung, University of Hasanuddin in Makassar, South Celebes. Your Excellency and audience, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are gratefully delighted and honored to have Your Excellency today, Ambassador Hartful, be here in this beautiful morning, fulfilling our invitation to give a general lecture for us. members of academic community in this room and in several universities through this video conference. We respectfully present our compliments to Your Excellency and have the honor to use this pleasurable moment to express our deepest gratitude to Your Excellency for your insightful thoughts you will impart upon us through your lecture today. We would like to hear your lecture, and we do not want to lose this time. Now your time is fully yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to Professor Dr. Lydia Freyani Hawadi in particular for the invitation to come here this morning and talk to you, and also to have the chance to talk also with colleagues in 7 other cities around Indonesia, which is a fantastic opportunity, and I'm delighted to be able to interact not only with students here at UI, but with students at so many very important universities around Indonesia. I'm delighted to say that I've been to 6 of the cities represented through our video conference. I'm not going to admit which one I have not been to yet, but I hope to get to that last one very soon. It's a great opportunity and a great honor for me to have the chance to talk to you. Can I just check first of all that is that okay with the microphone? Is everyone able to hear? Great. I was very pleased indeed to get the invitation from Professor Dr. Lydia Freyani Hawadi, because I think it's very important that we have the chance to exchange our experience and our understanding of each other's cultures. I think Professor Freyani gave a fantastic summary of some of the ways in which you can see consistent threads between Britain and much of the Muslim world in a much more imaginative way than I could begin to do, and I really like the idea of the 3 T's, and I'm delighted that the Beatles are such a strong pervading influence, perhaps alongside Man U and Arsenal and 1 or 2 other major British cultural icons. Sadly, the power of the British ambassador doesn't necessarily extend to getting Paul McCartney to come to Jakarta, but we'll see what we can do. But why do I think it's important to come and have this kind of exchange? Really, it's because we in Britain see Indonesia as a tremendously important partner globally. We want to work closely with Indonesia in a whole range of areas. We want to boost that trade that Professor Freyani talked about. We want to see how we can together improve economic regulation in the world, improve the economic climate in the world, and contribute to growth and to helping bring people out of poverty and hardship. We want to work together to tackle threats like climate change, which is a huge problem which faces everybody in the world, and where we are already working together very well between the UK and Indonesia to try to tackle those changes. We want also to work with Indonesia to tackle other problems which face the international community, and those certainly include counter-terrorism, but they also include countering the proliferation of nuclear weapons and countering the threats from disease, from crimes like people trafficking, cyber crime, all those kinds of issues which are major international problems which face the UK and Indonesia and many other countries around the world. But we also see Indonesia as very important, partly because you are the most populous Muslim country in the world, but also at the same time you have a very energetic, dynamic democracy. You've shown a transition from authoritarian rule to genuinely popular democracy in a very short space of time. You are a society which aspires to be inclusive and tolerant, another one of Professor Freyani's T's. And we believe that that makes you particularly important in helping to reach solutions to some of the international problems which we in the global community face together. So we think you're important. We think our relationship with you is important. But we also recognize that in some parts of the world, among some communities, particularly among Islamic communities around the world, there are misunderstandings about the UK, about my country. Now, that's not surprising. It's a long way away from Indonesia. Not that many Indonesians go to the UK. Not that many Britons come to Indonesia. It's about 120, 150,000 a year. Out of a total population of 60 million in the UK, that's not that many. We don't have historical ties which are as strong with Indonesia as they are with, say, Malaysia or Singapore, if you look at this region. But some of those perceptions, some of those misunderstandings are also coloured by what people think they know about Britain, including about the life of Muslims and the role of Muslims within the UK, and also about what they think they know about British foreign policy in areas which are of particular concern to Islamic communities around the world. And that includes the Middle East, and it includes Afghanistan, and those sorts of issues which are bound up in the big foreign policy priorities in those areas. Now, we can talk a bit about some of those a bit later on, but for example, I know a lot of people believe that within the Middle East we are biased towards Israel and, for example, provide weapons to the Israeli armed forces. We don't export any weapons to Israel. On the other hand, we do train the Palestinian police. People have misconceptions about our views on Iran. For example, not understanding that we do fully support Iran's right to a civil nuclear power program, and we have never disputed that. So there are some questions there, some issues which we can talk about later, but there are misapprehensions about our foreign policy in areas of concern to Islamic populations around the world, and our Foreign Secretary in a recent speech made clear that he wants to tackle those. He understands that they're there, and they're misconceptions that need to be sorted out. And there are also misconceptions about what life's like for Muslims in the UK. So what I'd like to do is to try and be as open about these issues as possible, and I look forward to having a discussion after my introductory remarks with you and with participants from all the other universities who are taking part today. Let's just give a bit of historical background about the position of Muslims in the UK. There are, roughly speaking, 2 million Muslims in Britain at the moment, and that represents about 3% of the population. And it's growing slightly faster than our population as a whole is growing. It's the largest non-Christian religious group. In other words, there are more Muslims in the UK than there are Buddhists or Hindus or Jews. And it's a community with a long history in the UK. The first Muslims that we know of arrived in the UK, the first recorded Muslims go back to the 17th century, and that goes back to another of Professor Freyani's T's, which is trade, because actually they were probably sailors on ships which were trading from the Middle East and who came and settled in some of our ports in the UK. And indeed, the first translation into English of the Quran also goes back to the 17th century, so nearly 400 years ago. The first designated mosque in Britain was established 150 years ago, and now there are over 1,600 mosques throughout the UK. It's unusual actually to find a major, a big city or a town. Well, there are no big cities with no mosques in the UK. It's unusual even to find a medium-sized town which does not have a mosque in the UK. And there are over 100 Islamic schools in the UK, and those are protected by laws which relate to religious schools, which cover both Islamic schools and Christian schools. So there's a long history, but the significant period of immigration from Muslim communities into the UK began in the 1950s, so 50 or 60 years ago. And over half Britain's Muslims now, so over 1 million out of those 2 million, are actually people who were born in the UK. And for many of these, they are third generation British nationals, British citizens, British residents. And English is, of course, their first language for many of those Muslims in the UK. The Muslim community in Britain comes from a wide variety of ethnic and geographical backgrounds, and represents many, many different strands of Islam, because they come from different parts of Asia, particularly from Pakistan and Bangladesh, but not exclusively, from the Middle East, from different parts of Africa, from the Horn of Africa, from Nigeria, all over the continent. And then, of course, there are a growing number of British converts, people who have converted to Islam, even if they were born into another faith. One of them is a very famous photographer called Peter Sanders, whose work we have exhibited here in Indonesia on several occasions, who converted to Islam many years ago and has taken a compelling series of photographs of British Muslims in different walks of life. Because it's very difficult, actually, to define what being a Muslim in the UK is about. Obviously, I'm not in a position to do so. I'm not a Muslim, and I'm not part of a Muslim community in the UK. But if you look at the Muslim community in the UK, it's very, very diverse. There are some who still stick together within quite a small, tight-knit community, representing a small group of families who come originally from a particular part of one of the countries in South Asia, for example. And there are others who are entirely fully integrated into British society, and for whom the question of whether or not they're a Muslim is, in a sense, for their friends, for the people they interact with, it's not really an issue, because we don't look at people and say, that person's a Muslim, that person's a Catholic, that person's Buddhist. We look at people and we relate to them in terms of what they are doing within British society and the role that they are playing. So that if you go to the doctor, your doctor might be a Muslim. If you go to the corner shop to buy some milk because you've run out, your corner shop might be run by a Muslim. If you get on a bus, your bus might be driven by a Muslim. If you have to go to court, your lawyer might be a Muslim. It's not an issue for the vast majority of people in the UK. For example, if you look at businesses, the business sector in the UK, 1 in 10 businesses in the UK is owned by a British national whose family roots are in Asia. And many of those are Muslims. There are several thousand Muslim millionaires among the British community. Many of those businesses have done very well. We have more Muslim MPs, members of parliament, in our parliament than there are Muslims in any other parliament in Europe, despite the fact that in, for example, Germany and France, there are very sizable Muslim minority communities. And we have, for example, a female Muslim in the cabinet, Baroness Wasi. I look around my colleagues in the Foreign Office, in our diplomatic service. There are a number of Muslim colleagues in the diplomatic service, including in our embassy in Jakarta. Muslim NGOs are very active, not least in providing emergency relief to countries like Indonesia when Indonesia has been hit by troubles. The NGO Islamic Relief, for example, provided a lot of assistance to Aceh, and I know we have the university from Banda Aceh here today. So Muslims are doing normal jobs, doing everyday activities as part of the normal fabric of society in the UK, and some of them are achieving great eminence, including in areas where which are, if you like, the very symbols of Britishness. You had Nasser Hussain, who captained the England cricket team, for example. And I think the point I really want to stress there is that none of this is surprising for most British people, because British Muslims are an integral part of British society, playing the same roles in British society that British Christians or British Hindus or British atheists play. I'd just like to share with you a little anecdote. We had a reception recently at my house for a group of young Indonesian Muslims who had gone to a summer school in the UK, which was organised by one of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales's charities. It's a programme called the Mosaic Programme, designed to bring together young Islamic leaders from around the world. And one of the girls who was on the programme, young women who was on the programme, was talking to me and saying that she had been really surprised because she'd been walking down Oxford Street, which is one of the main shopping streets in London. And she said, somebody stopped me and asked me the way to some other shop. And she said, I just didn't understand what was happening, because do I look English? And she was standing there, obviously an Indonesian lady. She was wearing a jilbab, and she said, do I look English? And I said, well, you don't actually not look English, because there are plenty of people, especially in London or Birmingham or Leicester or Manchester or wherever, who are British citizens who look pretty much like you do, actually. And so the fact that somebody was stopping you to ask you the way isn't that big a surprise. The kind of core guarantee for British Muslims rests really in the law in the UK. The freedom to practice your religion, the freedom to live your life and go about your business free from persecution on the grounds of your race or your faith, is something which is very, very strongly protected under British law. It's not a protection which was designed for Muslims. It's a protection which is there because British people, over the years, the British Parliament, the British nation has believed it's important to enshrine those principles in the same way that the Indonesian constitution enshrines those principles. And that guarantee is tremendously important. It's one of the things that helps British Muslims feel a degree of confidence about the way in which they can live their lives and practice their religion. Because most Muslims in the UK actually feel a very strong sense of belonging to Britain. If you look at the polling evidence, over 90% of Bangladeshi and Pakistani respondents, people who are originally from Bangladesh and Pakistan, who are now British citizens, say that they belong strongly to the UK. And that kind of evidence is reflected also for other Muslim communities in the UK. Now, that doesn't mean to say that our society is perfect. It doesn't mean to say that integration for British Muslims is something which is entirely trouble-free and entirely seamless. It would be silly to pretend that, and I'm not going to claim that. Because society is built up of individuals, and individuals have their disagreements, and communities have their disagreements. People don't always get along with their neighbours. People do commit crimes. British Muslims commit crimes, just the same as British Christians or British atheists commit crimes. And sometimes, depending on what those crimes are, or the reaction of the community or the reaction of the media, that kind of thing can get blown up out of proportion. And crimes or actions by misguided people can affect the way in which a whole community is perceived. Communities also worry about change. Some of the biggest problems we've had in integration recently over the last few years in the UK have actually not been anything to do with the Muslim community. They have actually been to do with integrating refugees from parts of Eastern Europe, where large groups of those refugees or stateless citizens were brought into quite small communities, often in the southeast of England, and there was a lot of local resistance to that. Now again, that's not surprising, because a small community, whether it's in Birmingham or whether it's in Bandung, has its own way of doing things. It gets used to the way it works, the way it lives together, and if you suddenly drop a lot of very different people who do things very differently in the middle of that community, it causes problems. But I think the important thing is that the government recognises that this isn't a straightforward process. It recognises that this is something we have to work at. Yes, we have to make sure that our legal framework, the framework that protects people from discrimination, or certainly protects them from violence, which is racially or religiously motivated, that religious framework has got to be very strong. But you've got to go beyond that. You've got to make efforts to promote integration through encouraging, for example, communities to take part in local government, through making opportunities available for people to mix together. An interesting statistic I came across when I was preparing myself for this talk today was that over 80% of people in the UK, the whole of the population of the UK, over 80% say that they regularly mix with people from different ethnic and religious backgrounds, whether it's at work or at school or in their social life. So Britain's a society where that kind of interaction goes on very regularly and very frequently, but we do need to keep supporting that from the government's point of view. And it's important for, as I said earlier, any minority community, whether it's the Muslim community or any other community in the UK, to have the confidence that their rights are going to be protected. That, of course, is true anywhere, and it applies to human rights more widely. It's no good just to have the laws that protect human rights, whether we're talking about freedom from religious persecution in the UK or the freedom of people to build churches in Bekasi. It's not good enough just to have those rights by law. It's important for those rights to be protected. And when human rights are violated, again, whether it's in the UK or anywhere else, whether it's allegations that people have beaten up Pakistanis in the UK, or allegations that members of the armed forces in Indonesia have tortured people in Papua, the important thing is that those allegations are investigated, and that they are dealt with in a transparent way, and that if people are found guilty of crimes, those people are prosecuted, and that people can see that happening, because without that, you don't get that confidence. to enable a community to live peacefully and in an integrated way side by side with each other. We don't always get that right in the UK. As I said before, we're not perfect. Our justice system isn't perfect. Our police aren't perfect. Our laws aren't perfect. But we do actually try very hard to do that. And we have a media and a system of parliamentary and public accountability, which means that when things go wrong, there is a lot of public attention to it, and people try to learn the lessons and make improvements for the future. So I do think it's all about the confidence that groups can have, different communities can have, to live alongside each other peacefully and in an integrated way, and that they don't feel threatened, that the minority doesn't feel threatened by the majority, that the majority doesn't feel threatened by changes which they don't understand, and the integration of groups whom they can't relate to. And the role of government in promoting that confidence through a strong legislative framework, through real respect for human rights, through clear action when those rights are infringed and when they're violated, that's absolutely crucial. Because we've been very much enriched in the UK by the work of our Muslim community. As I've said, it goes back some 300 or 400 years. But Muslims have given to British society and contributed a lot in so many fields, whether it's in the professional world, in the world of the arts, or sport, or public service, or business. And the community continues to help us to evolve. I mean, just to take one example related to the trade tea that Professor Freyani mentioned earlier, Britain is now one of the leading centres in the world for Islamic banking. That would not have happened, I believe, unless we had a very strong and dynamic British Muslim community who've led that development in the UK, and now British banks based in London are the biggest centre for Islamic banking in the world. So the Muslim community contributes a huge amount, and we want to make sure as the British government that we continue to provide that tolerant and integrationist, inclusive framework to enable British Muslims to continue to play that very, very dynamic and vibrant role within British society. I think I'm going to bring my remarks to a close there because I'm conscious that time is moving on and we want to allow enough time for questions from the other, from yourselves and from the other participants on the video conference. I hope I've been able to give you a little bit of a flavour of where we're coming from on these issues, and I look forward to a further discussion and debate with you during the rest of the session. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Ambassador. I would like to underline your statement that Indonesia is a very important country because of two things. First is that Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world. And second is that Indonesia is the democratic country having significant shift process of democratic. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is our great pleasure to avail ourselves of this opportunity of having a talk with Your Majesty Ambassador to enrich knowledge regarding the current phenomenology of Muslim in the UK that represent the future sample of Muslim in the West, the future of life of Muslim in the land that many cultures, race, religion, especially those Muslims who live in English cities, which are among the most cosmopolitan in the world. I would like to open to the floor questions, probably from this room and from other university on the screen. Each of you will represent one question from its universities. Raise your hand. First, state your name. First, you and sister. Okay, first two person first. State your name.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Putih Astuti from Strategic Intelligence Studies. At the first time, I would like to say I'm sorry if you if you don't mind. I would like to a sensitive question. One is based on your country experience in London St. James Square in April 1984 with Libyan diplomatic mission. Your country suggests that abuse of diplomatic privilege and diplomatic immunity. I would like to know which one from four immunities that you suggest, like person, premises, communication, or position, or only immunities of jurisdiction only. And two, honestly, sir, my idol is Prince William. Is that true? If you don't mind, the royal family can marry with Muslim. That's my question. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I think that your questions. Now is your time.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Tia from the Political and International Relations of Middle East program. According to the Republika newspaper daily in Indonesia, I read the Muslim in Europe, especially in Germany and Amsterdam, right now is growing rapidly. Unfortunately, Mr. Ambassador, Germany Prime Minister said that the Muslim in Germany cannot socialize with community, German community. And whereas the government of Germany released that the Islam and Muslim in Germany cannot be separated right now. But I'm very sad when he called them Muslim in Germany is radicalism. My question, Mr. Ambassador, how about your opinion about this? And understanding what the understanding Muslim in German like is what the understanding Muslim in UK like in German, and the government of UK called them Muslim is called them radicalism. I think Islam is religion rahmatan lil alamin. It means Islam is religion bring grace to all people, but only few people who understand other than Islam. So how about this, Mr. Ambassador? Thank you.
I think it's your time.
Thank you very much. One of the nice things about coming to talk to groups at universities is that you always get asked difficult questions. If I understood correctly, the first question was about diplomatic immunity and what kind of violation of diplomatic immunity we thought there had been in the Libyan embassy shooting in St. James's Square. Is that right? Yeah. I mean, that incident was obviously quite a long time ago, and I'm not familiar with all the legal argumentation. I'm not a lawyer myself, but the basic problem was that it was clear that a British policewoman was shot by someone who was in the Libyan embassy at the time. That was an outrage which we could not accept, particularly because the Libyan authorities refused to cooperate with the police investigation, and that led to the closure of the embassy and the suspension of diplomatic relations with Libya. We've obviously moved on from there. I mean, in terms of which aspect of diplomatic immunity was violated, I think it was an abuse of diplomatic immunity on an extraordinary scale. And that's why it required the very dramatic action on the part of the UK government that we had to take. But things have moved on. We have a very different relationship, happily, with Libya now, and we hope very much that those kinds of problems are never going to be repeated in the future. Can the royal family marry a Muslim? That's a very interesting question to which I don't know the answer, actually. The royal family until recently has not been able to, or at least the heir to the throne has not been able to marry a Catholic until recently. I think that is still technically the case, but there were, under the last government, proposals to change that law about the law relating to who the royal family can marry. The new government has not, as far as I'm aware, actually taken that proposal forward. I'm looking at Julia in case she happens to know anything more about this than I do. So at the moment, I think the legal situation regarding the heir to the throne is still governed by rather old-fashioned laws which do limit the number of people that they can actually marry. Second question was about the comments that Chancellor Merkel has made recently about the process of integration in Germany, and whether the same considerations, the same issues apply in the UK, and whether we regard British Muslims as radical. I can't really talk about the situation in Germany. I don't know about the situation in Germany. It's not for me to comment on that. In terms of your basic question, does the British government regard British Muslims as radicals? The answer is no. There is a small proportion, a small number, a small percentage of the British Muslim community who would describe themselves as radical and who express support for the use of violence to achieve their either political or religious aims. That's a very small number, and we know it's a small number because if you ask the vast majority of British Muslims, do they support radicalism? Do they support the use of violence? Do they support terrorist acts? They will say no. They do not support them. They think they're outrageous, and they condemn those who use radical means to support their ideas and objectives. And we know, the British government knows, that the vast majority, 95% more of British Muslims want to contribute in a peaceful and constructive way to British society. The number of people who are radicals who might get involved in violence or terrorism is a very, very tiny number. They are criminals, first and foremost, and we treat terrorism as a criminal act. It's not a manifestation of a religious identity. Terrorism is killing people. That's murder. That's all it is. Why you do it is a very secondary consideration. And the vast majority of British Muslims are, as I say, moderate, peace-loving, and wanting to get on with their lives and contribute constructively to British society.
Thank you so much for your insightful explanation of the questions. I would like to open to question for the other university on the screen that I see on the list is there is University of Gajah Mada, University of Lampung, and University of Brawijaya would deliver your questions. Yes. Hello. The technical. It is time for other university to give your questions. This lecturer today has played a key role for us to deepen understanding of the ongoing phenomenology of Muslim in the West. The living encounter of Muslim with democracy and secularism of today's world. If there is no other question from other university, I would like to open a question from people in this room. Microphone. Let's give microphone.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Excellency. My name is Suadi Saad from Serang, Banten. I want to know about the religious education in public schools in the UK. Is there religious education or spiritual education or ethics education maybe? That's the first question. And the second one is, we Indonesians have a problem with the conflict between Muslims and Ahmadites. And I know that in the United Kingdom, Ahmadites is one of a Muslim sect, maybe the big sect in British. I want to know about how do you treat the Ahmadite in the UK so that there is no conflict between Muslim and Ahmadite there. We have problem with the interpretation maybe in Indonesia, interpretation about the prophethood of Ghulam Ahmad. That is the problem. Do you treat them as a sect of Islam or do you treat them as religion? Thank you.
Thank you for your good questions. I would like to invite Your Excellency to directly answer the question.
Thanks very much. I think the first question was about religious education within our public state school system. Yes, we do have religious education within the curriculum in the UK, but it is essentially making students aware of the main faiths in the world. So in other words, it's, if you like, comparative religion. It's depending on the level of the child at which the classes are taking place, it's telling children, sharing with children the main elements of the major faiths of the world. So they learn at school not only about Christianity, they learn about the main elements of Islam, they learn about the main elements of Buddhism, of Jewish faith, of Hinduism. They learn about the main festivals and so on and so forth. And gradually, as you go further up the education system, there will be discussions based on that, on ethics and those kinds of questions. So it's not teaching them a faith, it's making children aware of faith issues and the importance which faith plays in the lives of many people and the role which it has institutionally and so on. The second question about Ahmadiyya. Yeah, there are quite a number of Ahmadi followers in the UK. the government doesn't think it's our business to treat them as a religion or a sect, or it's not for the government to make that decision. They are people who believe what they believe. As far as we're concerned, in the UK, they're free to believe that. There are people who have some very different and strange beliefs. We have people who believe that, if you go to the monument at Stonehenge at midsummer, you worship according to ancient Welsh or ancient British rites and traditions there. We have people who believe all kinds of strange things in the UK. Their freedom to believe that and to practice that and to preach it is protected under UK law. The fact that most people who define themselves as Muslims believe that the Ahmadi sect is a deviant sect in their terms, that's a matter for people who describe themselves as Muslims. It's not a matter for the British government. Why should the British government worry about that? So you ask how we prevent violence and conflict. I'm not aware that there is any serious tension or difficulty with the Ahmadi community in the UK. But if they were, for example, to come under threat from any group, then that would be dealt with according to the law, and such threats, such violence would not be acceptable. That it would be illegal because it would constitute persecution on religious grounds. If you say, this is my faith, if I believe that the moon is made of cheese and that there are spacemen who come down to Earth 3 times a year, I believe that, and that's my right. And so the fact they believe something which is different from what most Muslims believe, as far as we're concerned, that's their right and they're entitled to.
Thank you very much for your good explanations. Now time is only 10 minutes, so we would like to appreciate to everybody, to your excellencies, and we apologize to attendant in other universities because the time is up now. It was a great lecture we have this morning. He expressed our deepest appreciation to Your Majesty, Ambassador, for your insightful, distinguished lecture Your Excellency have given us. We are much appreciative of Your Excellency for your knowledge you have imparted upon us through your wonderful lecture this morning. Distinguished lecture that we also intend to be a means of facilitate to find a way of tightening bond relationship between people of academic community in Indonesia and in the United Kingdom in the future. We would like to much appreciative of Your Excellency, Your Majesty Ambassador, could facilitate if you could facilitate the bridge of working together among people of learning in the UK through a center of academic learning such as Oxford University or Cambridge University or any other university in the United Kingdom with those community members of academic learning in Indonesia, including those in the University of Indonesia, to get more widely opening door of streaming flow of intellectual exchange among people of academic learning worldwide. We avail ourselves of this opportunity to maintain the esteemed Embassy of the United Kingdom in Jakarta, the good relationships with the assurances our highest respects. I would like to turn this time to the steering committee, and thank you very much for your presentation today.
In the end of this lecture series, once again, we would like to express our gratefulness to have the opportunity to gain our knowledge regarding the Muslim community in UK that was presented by Mr. Hatful. As a symbol of our gratitude, we will give a souvenir represented by Mrs. Frani to Mr. Hatful. Mrs. Frani and Mr. Hatful, please step forward.
pleasurable moment. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
To Mrs. Franny and Mr.
I
Hatful,
unfortunately
please be remain at the
do not
podium to take
have my
pictures.
card today,
And
but I will
Mrs. Nolan and all
send
of the
you.
home-based lecturers are welcome to join them at the podium. We would like to thank you for all the attendance and for all the participants of the conference from the 7 universities in all of the in Indonesia. Thank you.